Hey everybody. In yesterday's video, I went over how I think that Grok is working and giving people personalized recommendations on Twitter based on their followers and the things they're reading. Um, People were interested, and I thought maybe I'd go into how we do this a little bit differently on DeepNewz. So let's dive in. So first of all, this is our homepage, the top news. These are the top news overall. So we're having sort of the ongoing bird flu story, and then news stories like the Switzerland winning the Eurovision Song Contest. It's a weekend, so it's a little bit of slow news. There's a Habib story about him having some problems with the Russian authorities. Um, an Oscar-winning director dies. Lomachenko has a knockout. There's some crypto stories, and we'll get into those. So I think this is the overall top news that's sort of shown the same for everyone. This is according to recency and top sources, interesting information, and sort of like the virality, like which things are sort of most relevant today on a Sunday. If you see the For You page, it's a little bit different. First of all, it's organized by sections, and they're ranked in sort of order of significance. So today, it's culture, probably on the weight of this Eurovision winner story, which is quite a big story yesterday, and there's less stuff happening on the weekend, so I think it kind of makes sense. Also, you see there's a top Netflix story, again the same Oscar-winning director story, and then even going back a little bit, people have been talking about the RFK brainworms, which ends up sort of in the culture section. As you see at the same time in economics, there's a there's a livestock emissions company. There's the National Labor Relations Board sides with Apple in a union situation. Keybridge stuff, DRAM in China, all kinds of things like this. So you see this is personalized to sort of topics that I read about, although we do this in a very specific way, which we'll get into in a second. If you scroll down, I get a bunch of UFC stories, the Khabib story, results from last night. Um, we're not showing the Derek Lewis story, even though that was probably one of the bigger ones because I already read it. So that's something that you're definitely going to see in For You, in the For You. Once you read a story, you're not going to keep seeing it. Also, if you don't like a story, you can click this unfavored and sort of get rid of it so you don't see it. And you the way we do For You recommendations is a little bit different. I mean, it does look a little bit like it looks at the reading history, which you can see here. These are the last 50 stories that I've read, and basically chooses the topics and shows top news from those stories. It's a lot of that, but we also show slightly smaller, older stories, and we discover a lot of sort of implicit topics. The interesting way we do this is we we actually look at the authors in the stories that you read. So, for example, I read a story like this, a UFC story. Hold on, just give it a second to load. And you see that there's a bunch of authors here, MMA Junkie and other sort of like your usual suspects for UFC stuff. And it's going to basically give favor to stories that those authors also participate in disproportionately. Now, in the case of UFC, it's really just going to surface top UFC stories. But in theory, these authors could talk about something else too, and I think that would be interesting. This is how sort of you can read one sports story and you're going to get other top sports stories, presumably in other sports. For example, like I don't really read a lot of hockey or soccer, but maybe I read a little bit, and I'm getting these sort of top stories. So this kind of Bundesliga promotion story, kind of interesting. It's a little bit of fringe for me, as you can see. It's lower down in my recommendations, but it could be interesting, right? I could be interested in that without having to manually select that I want to see stories about Bundesliga or soccer. As you see here, I get some stories about New York, NBA results. I do also get a bunch of India stories, not particularly relevant for me, but those sort of interesting to see the kinds of stuff that bubbles up there. Um, that's probably what happened there was I was reading some India stories in research. I mean, I do have sort of pretty eclectic set of interests, but try this out. You may get very interesting recommendations, and the cool thing is you'll get recommendations right away from as few as two or three article reads, because it does try to both micro focus on the particular niche from an author's perspective, beyond just sort of a broad category, and also at the same time will show you sort of other related topics essentially based on that author account. So it sort of fans out with a little bit of randomness. Um, we're working on a V2 of these recommendations, which should be out soon, which focuses more directly on micro topics. So, breaking up what people are up into say 500 or 1,000 topics and discovering a bit more readily, which ones you're reading a disproportionate amount. Um, I think that could be good. I mean, that's the thing with top news is there's just so many stories. I do think the top news is generally pretty good, but and it's great for discovery. It's going to show you things you didn't know you wanted to know. I think the example I use is the Olympics. No one is going to go and sit there and say, "Hey, I want stories about the Olympics." But once the Olympics rolls around, then you're going to want to see those. You're at least going to want to be exposed to it. Maybe you're not a sports fan, and then the model will sort of figure that out. But I think a lot of people find the Olympics interesting, even if they're not watching sports the rest of the time. Same about these, 50,000 March protests in Georgia. That story sort of started popping off yesterday and was shared a lot today. Um, no one's going to sit there and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in stories about Georgia." And yes, if you're interested in politics in Ukraine, you are more likely to find the story interesting. But really, like it's something that should show up. It should be sort of shown to for you. Um, so you can see there's now that it became a big deal, a lot of sort of big accounts like Foreign Policy and Bloomberg and The Economist were talking about it. But it actually started being showed by much more sort of niche accounts yesterday. If you see the accounts that were sharing it a day ago, a lot of Ukraine accounts, a lot of accounts commenting on areas like that. So yeah, if you see it's a you sort of see that spread. Sprinter Factory like a big war account that posts a lot of stuff early. So we actually had it pretty early, but now it's big enough to be reported by Bloomberg. So that also gets factored into the recommendations. I do think, again, the top news and the for you are two great views, but it doesn't necessarily obviate the need to look at your top categories, at least sort of, for now. So say you look at something like the crypto section and you're still going to want to see the top stories, which is this phishing situation, Fantasy Top doing very well on NFTs. Solana and Ethereum, competing for sort of which is going to be bigger in terms of activity. I think at a high level, those are the top crypto stories at the moment. There's a lot of small stories, of course, but I would say that this is probably more or less the right ranking. Also, this one, Blockworks faces backlash for pro Biden article. That was a very big discussion point online. Certainly, Grok surfaced it because again, it focuses more on discussion. But it's a big enough story to be a top news for us, especially on a relatively slow day. Let's see who mentioned there. Yeah. So again, crypto people chiming in. We actually have a lot more sources than these just mentioned here. These are just the top sources, but I mean, there's probably at least a dozen people, who had thoughtful comments there that you can see. Similarly, looking at tech and AI. Again, it's a weekend, relatively slow. Some, still some interesting stories. This Waymo self-driving car service hitting 50,000 rides was a pretty good story. Um, I think the big story probably really is this one. Apple and OpenAI rumored to announce some sort of Chat GPT integration in iOS. Um, Probably should still rank number one, but it's still very much up there. It's a good story. And if you, oh, where is it? Yes, there it is. And one thing I wanted to show real quick is, you see sort of the update, you see the very quick summary. We're tagging a bunch of tags and entities. And actually, I mean, this one really hits the gamut, mentioning Microsoft, OpenAI, Apple, ChatGPT. So if you open up one of those tabs, say OpenAI, now you're going to see all the stories tagged for OpenAI. And you're going to see the top prediction markets from Manifold. We integrated their public API. And I think this adds a little bit of color. Um, So we just integrated it. I think it's kind of interesting. But you see, will there be an AI language model that surpasses ChatGPT and other OpenAI models by the end of 2024? For those who don't know, Manifold is a prediction market where people bet an internal currency. It's more of a play money market than real money, but people take it seriously. So you get, as you can see here, you have 30,000 votes, which is quite a few. So Interesting wisdom of crowds approach. And what is actually interesting here too, as you can see, there was more votes for yes. So Manifold takes care of this situation where obviously it's a lot more fun to say yes. Other models will surpass ChatGPT, but the smart money is on no. So it's not necessarily just a voting scheme like you might see, on Twitter. People actually have to, have to bet and to stake a little bit. And the point is basically that it's actual prediction market where people bet their views, not just a yes no, sort of everyone counts the same. And same thing here. There's AGI questions. Again, same thing. More people want to bet on AGI because it's more fun, but the probability is, going to be in that 20 to 30% range. So that's kind of exciting. And you see sort of smaller niche things, um, about this GPT-2 chatbot, which is kind of an interesting little mysterious bot that popped up. So kind of cool. I think one thing we're thinking, let us know what you think here. Definitely something we're thinking about is using an AI model again to sort of summarize these stories and the links from there and these markets to really maybe give you just a concise paragraph on what is going on with OpenAI lately. I think it's I think it's great to parse these headlines and markets, and you can learn a lot. But it's a little bit, it's still like there's a little bit too much stuff. So let us know on the UX what you'd like to see. What will be kind of interesting for you to keep this as a sort of a permanent page. I know I'll be checking it. And then, similarly, you can see for Apple here, we show a little stock price uh, squiggle here. Definitely a lot of news involving Apple, everything from the union workers to Apple and ChatGPT, as well as the controversial iPad ad that was sort of a big story on Twitter the other day, and just in the tech sphere in general. As you see here, we have manifold markets, and you know some of these are, hey, is Division Pro gonna, is it gonna be killed? Is it actually gonna kill somebody? How much it'll be made? Um, Definitely kind of an interesting jumping off point, and from here you can click through to manifold and go ahead and make a bet. I guess we'll go ahead and bet. Will someone die wearing an Apple Vision Pro in 2024? Let's see, 16%. I can't bet on yes, so let's just go ahead and bet on no. Yeah, as you can see, Manifold also will have longer term markets. Like, will Apple announce a launch of a car by 2030? Um, they're able to have these long term markets because people also trade the bets, and it is sort of fundamentally a play money currency. So people don't have like actual serious amounts of money tied up, and yet they vote their views and they try to get it right. It's pretty cool. So yeah, as you can see, ChatGPT news, but so all these entities, like I said, are we're going to see the articles, the prediction markets. Yeah, let us know what you think. Let us know what's a good one, and how we could maybe use UI or AI to make these pages kind of more interesting for you. Yeah, here's the SoftBank one. Kind of interesting story here. So you can see how, based on these three modes of top news, for you news, these sort of categories, and now these linked entities, you can really spend a lot of time browsing and reading a lot, in my opinion. You can also see your reading history, so you can see a replay of what you read. Um, this only, I think, keeps up to 50, but kind of interesting, to sort of see what gets recommended. So take a look at the for you. Um, Let us know what you think, and we'll also be launching the upgraded version soon. So make sure to sign up before then. Thank you.